Tats Talks live stream going, and I couldn't think of a better person than you. You'd be a perfect person to help do this because you're doing a lot of podcasts and personal growth, and we've had lots of fun chats in the past.
Yeah, we always do have a good conversation, and you were like the first person that reached out, like, "Hey, do you want to be a guest on the podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's like that about?" And we had like a long conversation about doing it, and then we did the podcast, and then we had a really big conversation afterwards about doing it. And I'd already been kind of like toying with the idea of doing a podcast, but I hadn't thought past like the personal development it takes to do one where you go, yeah, it'd be cool to have a podcast. I'd have this topic and I talk about these things and you go, okay, now you're going to do it. Like, okay, what do I have to do to make it happen? And then you actually have to one day push send to the cloud and put that stuff up on a platform that sends it to the world to see. And that's a little nerve wracking, but you were instrumental in my decision to do it. So
Yeah, it was fun being a part of it. And so, Nate, for people that don't know, you kind of have this purchasing background, the VP of Purchasing Construction for a successful California-based real estate company, and then your podcast, which you're doing a ton of, and built up a lot of experience, sort of in this short period of time. Tell us more about where your head's at with all that stuff, because typically you don't think of someone in purchasing to wanting to do a podcast and do a lot of networking.
yeah, like most purchasing people, I think, live behind the gatekeeper. They want to have a wall, a moat, and some guards to prevent people from getting in and getting in front of them and ask them to buy some stuff because we're always swarmed and approached by salespeople. But
Give
I've I've found in my experience, like purchasing is really assembling a team to create a
mm,
project, right? Whether you're getting materials or you're getting services or you're getting a combination of both, you are assembling a team to do stuff. And if you want to have the best team available, you have to have relationships with the people you're doing business with. And so I always had this mindset of like, you want to have good relationships with your vendors. It wasn't until I started growing my network outside of my little niche industry and started doing it nationally and then started doing it outside of my industry that I really realized that there's a lot of power in having a big network. And the more people you know, the more solutions you can solve. The more solutions you can solve, the more value you can have. So I was just kind of like, maybe having my walls up and my guards up isn't a good idea. Maybe I should be more open to connecting with the people that are trying to get in front of my door. One, I think you have an obligation as a purchasing person to be aware of what's out there and what the other vendors are doing. And if you never um, try to meet new people or make new connections, you might fall into the trap of having, the least competitive pricing because you have never updated and compared against somebody else. But two, like you start getting exposed to new ways of doing things, new ideas, new products, and all this other stuff. Or you might just find like you didn't realize things. Like sometimes people come up to you and they say, like, I work for there's a big conglomerate company in my space called Masco, and they say, "Well, I'm with Masco," and you go, "Oh, you probably selling rain gutters and insulation of some sort." You're like, I'm not that interested. Already got a guy, but you realize like Masco owns Delta Faucets and Masco owns all these like giant brands. And they're not the only ones. And you start looking, you say, going, oh, there's an opportunity to maybe get better uh, economies of scale if we try to stay within brands or have more conversations or we get connected to people who can do national account programs. And so opening the doors to who you meet just opened a lot of doors to being able to solve more problems. So I just kind of started doing it a bit more. And then the podcast was like a little bit of an extension of it because I was kind of expanding my network. I wasn't really doing it intentionally, and I had this epiphany of like, what would it look like if I grew my network really, really big over the next 3 to 5 years? Wouldn't I be exposed to new ideas, people, and opportunities I wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise? So, why not say yes to more meetings? And you can't always just be on the hunt looking for people to talk to. Like, you have to start attracting people to yourself as well. And being in purchasing, it's a little easier to attract things into your life because people want to get to in your door anyways. But I was like, how could I, what if I want to have a conversation with somebody at this company, or get my foot in the door over there? Like, having a podcast would kind of open the doors to have conversations with people that otherwise wouldn't have let me do it. So I was like, hey, I'll do this podcast and I'll see where it goes. And I was nervous about doing it. I thought it would be difficult to find compelling guests to be on the show. I thought it would be hard to have conversations. I thought it would be, all these things would be difficult to do. And it turns out that was like the easier part. And the hard part was logistics. I'd always have problems with audio, with equipment, with malfunctions, or with logistics. And I learned as I went and got better at it. And because I was worried about finding guests, I was very open to meeting with people whenever it was convenient to them. So I used some programs that help make scheduling easy. And you basically just say, I use Calendly if people aren't familiar with these apps, but I use Calendly, and you just basically put in like, hey, if you want to do this kind of meeting, I'm available these times. And pick a time that works for you. So I had a big wide open schedule of openings, and you can restrict it to say like, I'm only gonna do one a day or something like that. I was like, I'll do 2 or 3 a day. And everybody just filled these voids in. And so before you know it, I'd gone from wanting to do 1 podcast a week to I needed to do 4 a week, just because so many people had booked and recorded episodes with me. I was like, I just can't be like, hey, we recorded one in January of this year. Like, we'll release it next year in January, because, that's how big the queue is. So I started pushing them out a little further, and I had intentions of slowing things down. And it took like a month and a half off to just kind of like things get caught up. But as soon as I'm like, hey, let's do a podcast again, it's like, it's hard to turn people down, because it's fun to meet people, fun to have conversations about it. So
yeah, we had this conversation. I stuck to like roughly a 1 to 1.5 per week, but you wanted to push more, and it's great. I love watching you do that.
Yeah, I need to pull it back. I think one more time. I'll probably take another hiatus in October, November, or maybe through Christmas, and then get hard on it again in January.
Yeah, well, I went through that phase. I recorded a bunch, and I was like 6 months ahead, and I got shut down. Right? A digital marketing person said, "Yeah, you got to slow this down." And I guess we're coming back to me saying, "Hey, when's the episode going to be published?" It's like 6 months from now. It didn't feel right, so I did slow it down and reflect. But what I found was, even without the podcast, once you have that base of content, it's easier to have better quality conversations with people. Did you find that?
Yeah, I think you get a flow of how you want to converse. You get a flow of how you want to ask questions. The difference between, I think, a conversation and a podcast, like, is conversation is very two-way. Like, we may talk about something, and you may ask a question back, and I may talk about it for a long, long time, and then like it goes all over. And the podcast tends to, you as the host, you tend to keep the focus on the guest and get the guest talking and let the guest answer the question. So if they say something, you might give a little insight about it, but you don't maybe really go off and take a harder take on something. I mean, sometimes I do, but you're just trying to keep it focused there, where if you're having a conversation, like, you can go all over the place, and you have to rein it back in. And it does help you to be a bit more focused on what you want to talk about and get into the meat of the matters.
Yeah, I think stylistically, I love that type of podcast. So I think we're sort of on the same page with that. Now, tell me about being a purchaser and being approached. Like, you've been approached a ton. Now, what are the good things you've seen? What are the bad things you've seen?
Gosh, that happens all kind of ways. So, there's the digital messaging. There's like the people that'll message you on LinkedIn. there's the people, the way they email you,
Yeah.
and then there's phone calls and showing up at the door
Mhm.
unannounced. I mean, right now we're in COVID, so that doesn't happen quite as often. And then there's the in-person meeting. So
Mhm.
maybe I'll go through step by step. So
Sure.
the DMs in digital messaging is really done poorly. Most people do it pretty a bad job of it. Like a lot of times, I don't know how I do it, but I get on email lists, right? And you get just jammed packed with these updates that they tell you useless information, right? They're just like, here's how great our company is, right? And that's all they do. Here's the greatest stuff about the company. Here's all these things we do that'll be awesome for you to do it. And you get so many of them that you just stop reading them, right? And they end up in like my Outlook goes a focused in an other folder and then a spam folder. So if it's not in the focused, I don't even look at the other. Like it's immediately just deleted out, and the
Yeah.
spam still deleted out. So very few of those emails even get to where they're going. So there's probably some numbers. If you send out 1 million of them, you get 2 or 3 responses, and it closes the sale. So that's why
Yeah,
people do it.
familiar.
Yeah, but I think the ones that are really bad, and those aren't like bad. They're just kind of like you get so many, you just don't have the time to
Sure.
consume that much information. The ones that are bad, I hate, is these handcrafted emails that usually start off with, "Hi, I'm so and so. I saw your profile somewhere, and I wanted to reach out to you and tell you how great my company is. And I think our products can solve your problems. And here's how we've done it for other people. And why don't we set up a time and I can explain to you how awesome I am and how much money I can save you." And usually those emails are off topic in the sense of like they didn't do their research. Like yes, I'm in purchasing, but I don't buy medical supplies. Like you clearly like didn't read that. But then they fall into this like guilt trip. Like, hey, you didn't respond to my third email, so before I give up on you, I just wanted to say one more thing. And it's like, and by that time, I'm kind of annoyed, and I start recognizing your name. And so, like, if I saw you or recognized you somewhere, I would be already turned off to having a conversation with you. I'd be like, you kind of missed the mark. You've kind of already had a bad reputation.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people treat the DMs on LinkedIn the same way. They'll message you like, "Hey, can I tell you about how great I am?" And the reason why I always say this is usually that's what people do. They want to talk about themselves first. They want to say, "This is what I'm doing, and I want to like tell you about it, and this can save you a bunch of money." Instead of looking at the other person reaching out with, "Hey, let's make a connection, let's make a relationship." And most people like talking about themselves, right? First. So if you can get that other person talking about themselves, then the relationship becomes a little bit more like they're very more engaged into it. So when you're talking about yourself, people don't want to hear it. But if I can reach out to you, so I actually had a good example how somebody reached out in my direct messages today, and it was a guy that sells materials that we would actually use. Like he knows that he does business with companies like mine, and I know he sells products to companies like mine. So we already knew that there was like a mutual reason to do business. And he messaged me and he said, "Hey, I like the content you're creating on LinkedIn. It's really cool. I get fired up, and I like to treat my guys to get them all fired up." And we kind of had like a little back and forth, two or three messages back and forth about it. And then he said, "Hey, any chance you could point me in the right direction of I could talk to at your company to get our products on some of your projects?" And just how it happens to be me. I'm the person. And because we've had this conversation, I said, "Hey, here's my email. Send me over your information. I have a project that's coming up in a few months. It's going to go out to bid. We can get your product spec as an equal on the product. We get a price on it. Like we can investigate this." And I think if he would have just approached with like, "Hey, here's my product. Can I be on your bid list?" It would have been like, okay, whatever. But because he engaged in a conversation that was relatable, we had a conversation, and then like now I feel like I know him a little bit better. I'm not like friends with him yet, but it's the start of something. So that I thought was a good example. And then phone calls. I First off, if anybody knows me, they know I don't answer my phone. Like there's like a few people answer the phone. Most people, it's go to voicemail just for the fact that I don't like answering the phone and getting blindsided with a topic. Like I'd rather you leave a message. Here's the
Sure.
topic. Maybe I can go research the answer. I can get back to you quickly. Or like your question just requires an email message back with the answer so I could kind of get that information real quick. So if I don't know the number, I don't answer it, and I'm not gonna like be. And I hate it when I do actually answer it, and it's all of a sudden you're like distracted from what you're doing, and somebody's like, "Hey, I want to get you, can I get 5 minutes of your time?" And all of a sudden, like 5 seconds turns into like 50 minutes, and you're like pulled in a different path, and you're just like, so it's already. I feel like I'm being my personal space is being invaded. So like don't call. And like if you get me on by accident, it's like I'm gonna probably get off as quick as I can. So I recommend the cold call. I think that is over, at least for me. There's some salespeople that still swear by it, but to me, I just like it's gonna annoy me, and I'm already gonna be on edge if I agree to set a meeting with you. Um, and then I think with in-person meetings, a lot of times people show up um, not timely. They either show up too early to meetings or they show up late to meetings, and not like late, but like, well, sometimes they like tell you, like they text you like 3 minutes before, like, hey, I'm running about 15, 20 minutes late. Um, can we do this or whatever? And it's like a lot of the times I book my calendar very stacked, so I got back to back to back. And if you're like 15 minutes late and I have a half hour with you, like that 15 minutes is all that's left. Like there's not more time to go extend along. So I think you want to always be on time. But other times people show up like a half hour early, and you get a message from the receptionist like, "Hey, the so and so's here to see you." And it's like, well, I'm not ready to meet with them. So now I got to let them sit in the lobby, and they're there not doing anything, or the receptionist is like feels like they got to entertain them. So I was told early in my career, if you're gonna show up for a meeting, if you show up at 5 minutes till, you're late. If you show up before 10 minutes till, you're too early. Go wait in the car. Like you're a nuisance. So that sweet spot is between 10 and 5 minutes. So that way people know, like, hey, you're there, you're ready, but you're not there too early. That it's gonna be. So that's what I do. And then when you come to the meeting, I think come prepared, like a little bit. And I would suggest also be cognizant of people's times. Like everybody wants, like, oh, let's have an hour meeting. Like, well, most of the time what you want to talk about doesn't take an hour. It takes 20 minutes. And if the
Sure.
conversation's good, we can extend it to 30 to 45, but just come prepared. So like, I don't need to hear the backstory of what, like if your company's been in business for 50 years at that meeting, like that's information that's maybe relevant down the road. We can revisit it, but it could also be sent ahead of time. Like here's the information I'm going to bring to talk to you about. Here's the company information. Here's where I'm about, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time on kind of like the backstory. And then also vice versa, it's also helpful if you research the company you're coming to see, so I don't have to go through the gist of what we do, which I don't mind kind of going into like the little spiel
Yeah.
about it, but like have at least a general concept of who we are, so it's not like, okay, oh my God, like you're trying to pitch something that like clearly is off the mark because you didn't research like what type of company we are. um,
Yeah,
the
I'm with you. When someone asks me, like, tell me about your company, they can't tell you anything. I'm like, oh, that's rough. What is there certain times a day that are better? Because I was interviewing someone else in property management, and they're like, don't do anything on these days. Are there any things within your business? I'm guessing there isn't, because you're kind of at that senior level in your company, but is there some tendencies that you notice between yourself or other property as or purchasing managers?
I like I hate morning, right? Like
Mm,
first thing. Like I don't want to walk in to the office and the first thing I do is got somebody ready to see me. Like I want to be able to get in, get situated, get going. So if I start the day at 8, I probably don't want to take a meeting with a vendor till like 9:30, 10 o'clock. A little bit of time to get kind of adjusted, get in the rhythm, and get going. Mondays are typically a little hectic, I think, in general, like in general. So usually Mondays isn't a good day to do things. And I think most salespeople are the same way. They rather get kind of like organized on Mondays and then Tuesday through the rest of the week. For me, Wednesdays are always super busy. That's just personally like the days we have. Most of our fixed meetings happen on Wednesdays, so those aren't usually the best for me. So I tend not to do meetings on Mondays or Wednesdays. Um, a lot of people like Tuesdays and Thursdays, specifically in the afternoons, because you have maybe a little bit more free time, less
Hmm.
distractions. The day's kind of winding up. And other people say don't do Fridays because Fridays is like the day everybody's like kind of checked out or leaving. But I actually like Fridays, Friday afternoons, because a lot of times I'm done with the week of thinking and I just want to just kind of have a conversation and just take some like not like an energy drain of figuring out complex problems, but just be able to just kind of like, hey, let's just have a conversation that's casual. There's not a lot of meetings that are going to be at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon that I'm going to be distracted that are coming up. So I kind of
Hmm.
dig like a mid afternoon or mid morning, like anything
Hmm.
after 10:30 to about 3 o'clock on a Friday. Those
Yeah.
to me are pretty cool. And then another great one I like is Wednesday or Thursday, like meet for a cocktail or something or a
Yeah.
coffee like at the end of the day. Those are my favorite times to probably do meetings.
Nice, nice. So I think you're doing something really genius. That you're starting to course on teaching people or salespeople that don't sort of understand how to work with a purchaser and approach them. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so as I was doing my podcast, I started thinking of like ideas that I could I was like, hey, eventually this thing needs to support itself a little bit because I can't, have this semi-expensive hobby that just is taking some money out to produce content. So I started kicking around ideas of like, what could I do? And I was asking some people around it. And I started asking some pretty smart people in sales, and they're like, dude, you have all this experience in purchasing. You have all this experience working with vendors. You have all this experience networking. And the thing we haven't talked about is like at all these trade shows, all these networking events, like
Yeah.
I would go have these conversations with people like after like all the meetings were done, we're having drinks. I'd be like, hey, you guys should do this, or you guys should do this. We'd always like brainstorm ideas. And I was kind of giving advice and guidance anyways. And I was like, I really like that stuff. I love it when I could say, oh, Tats, I want to help you get connected with this company I know over here, or here, I think this will be a good referral partner. So I was always kind of doing this stuff that like, that would be a really, really cool thing to do because nobody's in the space of really going, hey, like, what if we gave you some sales advice from what the buyer thinks of how you're doing it? And at first I was like opposed to the idea. I was like, I don't know about that. Like, I don't think I want to go in that space. And I started thinking about it more and more and more. And I was like, you know what? I actually kind of digging that idea. I could probably do it. And I think the reason why I didn't like it, I was a bit uncomfortable with teaching people I knew. Like to me, it was like, oh my God, these are people I know, and these are people like that do sales. Like, what if I just come across as a complete moron and I don't have any like insight or knowledge? And I just kind of realized like, hey, that's a lot of self doubt you're telling yourself, and that's part of the reason why you did the podcast was because you have these self doubts that prevent you from doing big things and stepping out of your comfort zone. So, and we've talked about this before about doing things that scare you. And I
Yeah.
was like, man, maybe I need to go down this path. And then I started asking some of my vendor friends. I said, hey, do you think this would be a good idea? And they're like, oh, of course, yeah, we'd love to hear insight like this. And so I started pursuing down and started figuring out. I started working with a coach, and one of the things when you're starting any business or any idea is you think you're niche down a lot. You go, hey, I want to write a book or I want to tell a story. They go, it's not niche enough. Like you got to get down to like so detailed that if you're describing who your ideal audience is, like somebody, it goes, oh, I know that person. Like I specifically know. And I had a guy on my podcast come in. He writes comic books and horror novels, and
Nice.
he starts talking about like you got to know who your niche is. And I was like, yeah, of course I do. It's demographics, our name of demographics, 30 to 40. They've worked at the company for 5 years. He's like, no, it's like my person I write to is somebody that grew up Midwest, middle class, but felt rebellious, but never was that rebellious. They felt it in their mind, but then get out of it. They probably listened to punk rock music, and they were really into science fiction, but not just any science fiction, but they were into like Lord of the Rings and anime and um, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but not Power Rangers. And you're like, oh my God. And then like he had this poster of, I forget how you pronounce it. It was like a chulu. It's like, I don't know if you know what this thing is, but it looks like this
No.
octopus head. And I was like, I know, like I literally go, I know two people that I personally know that exactly who would love your stuff. Like I actually could know them by name and where they live and who they are, and I know these things about them. I was like, that's how level of detailed you got to go. So I started working with the coach, and they're like, get detailed, get niche, and helped out a lot with getting in my course, and then I put it in an evergreen format, and I didn't even know what evergreen. There's so much stuff when you start getting outside of your comfort zone, like of what you learn, like terms and stuff. I was like, what's an evergreen course? Like, oh, it's a course that kind of lives in perpetuity. It's up in the cloud, and people can take it as they go. And once you do it, it can be added to, but you don't re-give it every time. I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I created that course and launched it a couple weeks ago. Right now we're in the beta version. I have some people going through it, give some feedback and provide a little bit more insight. But I'm super excited about it because I think it's going to be really valuable to the people that take it, right? They're going to get some insight that they couldn't have seen otherwise. And if they implement what they learn, I think they will be able to just really destroy their sales quotas and goals, because they're not going to be out there. It's not going to be like, hey, let me give you some motivational rah-rahs. It's going to be, here's actual items that you can go out there to do today, build long-term relationships with the clients you want to work with. And over time, that's going to turn into a really big book of business that's going to make your career really successful.
Yeah, so Nate, I know you. You're a very authentic guy, but I love the sound of it because it's like you're a purchasing guy, and you have all these salespeople come to you, and the people that you got to know, you start selling stuff back to them. It's perfect, man. I got to be a purchasing guy too. I think I'm going to change my title.
You can. Well, you've been a
I
ton of
know.
clients, man. Why
I
not?
know. No, I know you mean that you're a very genuine guy with that, but I love your direction with all the stuff you're doing, because you're trying a bunch of stuff. Like I just see you're just everywhere. You're talking to everyone, and I guess some people are probably just not used to a purchasing guy going to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember when I was selling stuff in hotels, we had this other business, and we were in Las Vegas, and we were trying to see the purchasing people, and they were all located at the dungeons of all these brand spanking new hotels, and it was kind of a very sad thing. They're behind the desk, and no one, if they don't show up for a week, work for a week, maybe nobody will notice because they're so secluded. So what you're doing to me is awesome. Like you're just out there, you're connecting, you're not afraid of salespeople, and you're not afraid of having conversations.
Yeah. What I started like realizing is like I started like people would always be like, "Hey, you can't get too close to your vendors, or they're just trying to get in your back pocket." And I want to like almost say the opposite. Like you should watch out for me, because I'm going to try to get in your back pocket, because like people will be like, hey, this is great. You're meeting with us. We want to tell you about our company and what we're doing and find out like how we can do business with you. But at the same time, like if we go to lunch, like I'm asking you questions like, hey, what is the market doing? What are people wanting to do? What are you seeing the trends are going to be? Like I'm trying to gather all this other information.
What percentage of your sales volume from us?
Not just necessarily like what we're doing business wise, but how can we make a better apartment project? How can I garner this information, about the markets and the trends that are coming down, and implement it in other areas of my business? And so like I felt like I was always getting so much more out of the vendors than they were getting out of me. So when people go to lunch and be like, I'll grab the bill, and they're like, why are you doing this?
What's the catch? What's the catch?
I got more out of this meeting than you did. Like, let me get this meeting, let me get this bill. So
yeah, but people are people. They're going to work extra hard for you, especially if you're good to deal with and you're not trying to sort of nickel and dime every single thing that people that like you are going to put more effort and give you the heads up on stuff and give you preferential treatment. So
Yeah, for sure. They always do.
yeah, that's cool. So where do you see all this stuff going? Like you're creating courses. What's the end game?
I'm just right now continuing this journey of self-discovery. Like I know they tell you like you need to have defined goals and defined actions and define this, but I've been visualizing what my life might look like in 5 years, and I want to have some flexibility to work on the projects I want to work on. I want to be able to be a little bit more in control of my destiny, and if I have an interest in something, pursue it. So it also revolves around, being better with the family, being able to travel more, and maybe work a little bit more location independent. So if you want to go somewhere, for a month, 2 months, you could work remotely, and continue to do that. So it's kind of taking steps along that path. It's this idea of, hey, if you've raised your expectations of what you can do in 3 to 5 years higher than where you currently see them, and you keep taking sustained progress towards them, aren't you going to achieve things you didn't think were possible? And wouldn't that be kind of an interesting experiment? So I'm just kind of going down this path with intention of pushing past what I believe are limiting beliefs holding me back in the past and setting new ones and then knocking those ones down, and just constantly looking to kind of serve and connect other people and build a network of amazing people that you can constantly refer out. And so like when you first start, you go, hey, where's it going to take me? Who am I going to know? Who am I going to introduce people to? But you start meeting people, and then like a lot of times I'll meet somebody and it's like fortuitous. Like I'll be like, hey, I'm talking to somebody over here that's in this space of needing a patent attorney, and then the afternoon it's like, oh yeah, my father-in-law is a patent attorney. It's like, oh, here we go. Like these things just keep like magically happening. Of you're looking for this, I'm over here, I'm playing matchmaker, and it's just been a ton of fun to do that. So I think I'm going to continue to enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and see where this thing takes me. But I'm expecting it to be a lot of fun, and if we talk in 5 years, which I'm sure we will, be like, hey, this didn't go as planned. This is a completely different direction than we ended up.
Yeah, it usually happens like that. I think for me as well. So I'm looking forward to continue to stay in touch, and yeah, it's going to be fun. I think fun for both of us.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a blast getting to know you. And it's been less than a year since we first connected, and we've talked about a ton of different crazy topics too along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So Nate, thank you. First
Thank
live episode. It was fun.
Yeah,
I
it
love the
was a fun.
because this is kind of something we would just chat about anyways,
Mhm.
and if other people could sort of listen in and join in, that's kind of what we're doing. So I think someone out there can get some value out of some of the stuff we're talking about. I guess I
Well,
guess that's where.
the live actually helps your assistant out because now you don't have to like get in the queue and post it out. It's just like, hey, we're on the live. It's out there now. It's done. Like it
Yeah,
just exists.
yeah, for sure, man. Okay, well, thanks, Nate.
All right. Thank you.